Hey y'all, my name is Susan Sparks and I am the senior pastor here at Madison Avenue Baptist Church, right here in New York City. We are a diverse community brought together by faith where everyone is welcome. We hope you enjoy our service today. Many of you know that I was honored this week to go down to Atlanta, Georgia, and do a TEDx talk. Now let me just Y'all, stop. Let me clarify one thing. I called a friend of mine down in Atlanta, and I told her I was coming down to do it, and she was like, "Oh my God, I didn't know you knew Ted Turner." This is not linked to Ted Turner. This is actually a conference that started back in 1984. TED stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. And so they invite people from all different industries to give what they call talks on ideas worth sharing. And they're really short, and they're really focused, and they're really hard to write. So I learned a lot about trying to put a tight message together, which I know you're happy to hear for future sermons. I know, another round of applause for that. The talks are uploaded on YouTube. I think mine will show up in a couple of weeks. But mine was an 8-minute talk on how laughter can achieve world peace. There you go. Now, my original plan was to get up and do the TEDx talk and then just say, and the people said, and sit down. But then in watching the headlines this week, I just couldn't do it. So what I ended up doing is writing a completely separate sermon, incorporating little bits of the talk, some which may be familiar to those of you who have been here and heard my preaching, but incorporated them into a broader message about the power of common ground. And power of common ground is true for everything from personal relationships to business relationships to the UN. So this morning, I thought we would walk through 4 tools that we can use to find common ground. The first one, of course, coming from me, would be laughter. And that's what I talked about down in Atlanta. And as I said in my talk, laughter brings us a fresh perspective. Some of you have heard me talk about Toby and I seeing a billboard in Minneapolis, and at the top it said Minnesota Cremation Society. And underneath that it had a photograph of a casket, and underneath that it said, think outside the box. Right? That's what laughter does. It brings us a fresh perspective. So let me share what I've learned in 15 years as an ordained minister and a stand-up comedian. You ready? Laughter is the key to world peace. And no, that's not a punchline. Because when we look at each other as human beings, we tend to see the differences first. But laughter reverses that formula. When we laugh together, we share something. And it's like a giant spotlight is shone down on our commonalities. And in that moment, something shifts beneath the surface. And we start to go from judgment to forgiveness, from hatred to understanding, from despair to hope. I mean, it's no wonder that Georgetown University's conflict resolution program has identified humor as a key tool in peace building. I mean, why not? You know, genetic studies have shown that notwithstanding things like race, nationality, or gender, we human beings are 99.99% the same. I mean, think about that. It means all the hatred and judgment and even warfare is over 0.01%. I mean, that is so crazy. I mean, who would fight over a decimal point like that? I mean, it's like my Southern grandmother used to say, honey, I think the butter has slipped off their biscuit. I mean, are we going to change the world overnight with laughter? No. But what we are going to do is start a ripple effect that will change how we see each other, and eventually change the world. So laughter is our first tool. A second tool that we can use is education. This week and weeks past, we have watched as our brothers and sisters in Puerto Rico have struggled to meet basic needs after the devastating Hurricane Maria. And we've also watched as aid to Puerto Rico has lagged. And more importantly, we have watched as public opinion or public outrage over this lack of support has lagged. Now, why is this happening? Well, I think there's a myriad of reasons, but a huge one is ignorance. You know, while most people know that our brothers and sisters in Puerto Rico are struggling after Hurricane Maria, apparently what most everyone doesn't seem to know is that these brothers and sisters are American citizens. You know, a recent poll found that only 54% of Americans knew that people born in Puerto Rico, a Commonwealth of the United States, are U.S. citizens? I mean, hello? I mean, besides being really embarrassing, why does this matter? Well, 2 reasons. Number one, it means half of America thinks that what happened in Puerto Rico was a foreign problem and not a domestic problem. Which leads us to problem number 2. Studies show that people attach an overwhelming priority to problems at home. And that certainly includes distribution of aid. In short, we got to get the supplies out to our folks in Texas. They're our people. I mean, Puerto Rico, yes, but that's a foreign place. There is absolutely no excuse for ignorance like this, I mean, especially given the access to information these days, like through the internet, or Amazon.com, or the media, or the free library system. Jesus commanded that we love our neighbor as ourselves. And sometimes that may seem a hard road. I mean, our neighbor may seem separated from us by a huge mountain of difference. Our neighbor may seem like a foreign nation. But if we educate ourselves about each other, which might mean learning about the states and territories of our own country, or learning about an unfamiliar religion, or learning about someone's sexual orientation, or learning about a different political party, if we educate ourselves, we will eventually find common ground. So we can laugh together, we can educate ourselves, and we can also, number 3, engage in public conversation. This week, in addition to all the other news we were watching, we stared in horror as a gunman perched on a high floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel took a cache of automatic weapons and systematically killed 59 people and wounded more than 525. Many are once again crying out for public debate on gun control. But rather than engaging in that debate, gun lobbyists are dismissing the conversation, arguing that it's simply politicizing the tragedy. The comedian Trevor Noah had some thoughts on this. He said, "Wow, I wish I had used that argument when I was a kid. Like when I did something wrong and my mom wanted to ground me. You know, I should have just said, 'Mom, man, is this really the time we should politicize what's happening? This is not the time to talk about my lack of self-discipline. This is the time to pull together as family.'" I can't help but think of Jesus' words in the book of Matthew that Kevin read for us. "With the judgment you make, you will be judged. And why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye when you have a log in your own?" I'm going to go out on a limb, shock, and say if you applied Jesus' parable to the gun debate, you might get something like this. I can't believe the speck in the eye of these gun control advocates. They are politicizing this tragedy, using it to force a debate. Okay, yeah, 11,000 people in the United States are killed annually by firearms, and yeah, the U.S. leads every developed country in gun violence, and yeah, America has 4.5% of the world's population, but 50% of the civilian-owned guns. And yeah, gun stocks do tend to rally after shootings. But by pushing public debate on gun control during this tragedy, that's just reprehensible. Like any human dynamic, without conversation, without public debate, we cut ourselves off. We shut down the possibility of hope. We shut down the possibility of reconciliation. We shut down the possibility of ever finding common ground. Let me offer one more way. One more, number 4, ways of finding common ground, and that is getting past hatred and self-interest. This month, our Bible study class, led by Kevin Davis and BJ Hutto, which, by the way, if you're not going, you must go. Run, do not walk. It is fantastic. There's the plug. This month, the Bible study is doing an examination of race and the Gospels. And one of the readings that was offered is an incredible story about a Klan leader who became a civil rights activist. His name was Claiborne Ellis. Ellis grew up in poverty in Durham, North Carolina, the son of a mill worker. He married at 17, fathered 3 children at an early age, 1 child as a special needs child, and despite working 2 jobs, could rarely pay his bills. Ellis said in an interview, "You know, people told me to abide by the law and go to church and do right and live for the Lord and everything would work out. Well, it didn't. It didn't work out. It kept getting worse and worse, and I began to get bitter. I began to blame. And so I joined the Klan because it made me feel like somebody. Ellis eventually became the leader of the local Klan and battled for years over race issues, including battling with a local desegregation activist, a black woman named Ann Atwater. For years they fought, just vicious fights back and forth. But then, over time, something happened. Ellis said, during those days, over time, it became clear to me that she, Ann Atwater, had some of the identical problems that I had. That I had suffered like she had. And then I had to ask myself, why have I spent my entire life fighting people like Ann? It took years. But in the end, Ellis resigned the Klan, and he too began fighting for desegregation. He moved past the hatred and self-interest. And when he died back in 2005, Ann Atwater spoke at his funeral and said, I believe God had a plan for both of us. I read that obit and immediately thought of the verse in Colossians 3 that reads, above all, clothe yourself in love, which binds everything in perfect harmony. I mean, love is the glue that has the potential to hold the world together. And if we find common ground, then we will see how love, like glue, can seep in and hold us together. Yesterday, I was in the Atlanta airport getting ready to fly back, and I was tired, and I'd finished with my work, and I didn't feel like reading, and I was losing at solitaire. So I just put everything down, and I just started watching. It's always fun to watch people in an airport. And in the midst of all the busyness going around, there were two sets of people about 10 feet from me. One was a Muslim woman. I don't know. I'm going to say she was East Indian. I do not know. But she had on a full burqa, and she had 3 kids at her feet, 2 boys and a little girl, probably ages 3 to 5, something like that. And they were, for the most part, in traditional clothing. And the 3 kids were hunkered over an iPhone, giggling over a video. Now, a little ways away was a white woman, and I kid you not, in a NASCAR jacket. She had a little boy about 5 years old, and she was occasionally eyeing the woman in the burqa with suspicion. She was also involved in her phone, and after a few minutes, her little boy, who had been watching the other kids, slowly slinks over and peers over and starts watching the video. Then something happened in the video that was funny, and all of the kids laughed at the same time. And in that moment, this kind of organic thing happened. He just saddled right in and sat by that little girl and started watching the video. And I kid you not, she's sitting there and didn't even look up, and yet turned the phone just a little bit so he could see it. At this point, the moms looked down, saw what was happening, then looked at each other and just shrugged. I mean, these little kids didn't see the differences. They didn't see the clothes or the race or the nationality. They saw common ground. And that's seen as a microcosm of what could happen in the world if we too seek common ground. What could happen? But the point is, we have to be the ones to make that happen. We have to make the first move. It's like a parade Toby and I saw last year in the Midwest. It was called the Stand Still Parade. Why is it called the Stand Still Parade? Because all of the Shriners and bands and floats were stationary. Parked along the side of the road, it's the crowd that marched by. Like that Stand Still Parade, we can no longer passively stand and watch judgment and hatred march by. It's our time to move. It's our time to get up and march past that 0.01% difference. It's our time to come at the world with a fresh new lens and find commonalities. It's our time to educate ourselves, engage in public conversation, move past the hatred and self-interest, laugh together. Brothers and sisters, it is our time to find common ground. And the people said, Amen. Thanks for joining us. Madison Avenue Baptist Church is located at 31st and Madison Avenue in New York City. Our website is www.mabcnyc.org.
O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all